Hi, welcome to Late Boomers Podcast. I'm Cathy Worthington.
And I'm Mary Elkins. We're so glad you're joining us today. As always, we're here to celebrate the possibilities that come with this exciting stage of life, because it's never too late to reinvent yourself, strengthen your relationships, or discover something new.
Today we're talking about one of the most important and sometimes most challenging aspects of life, our closest relationships. Whether you've been together 5 years or 50, every couple faces obstacles. And the question isn't whether problems happen, it's how we move through them together.
Yeah, that's so true. And there's trust, intimacy, forgiveness, passion, and even conflict, which are all a part of the journey. And today we're going to explore what helps relationships survive difficult moments and even become stronger because of them.
Joining us are husband and wife therapists, Bruce Chalmer and Judy Alexander, and they are hosts of the podcast called Couples Therapy in 7 Words. That sounds delightful. I can't wait to listen to that. Bruce is also the author of several books, including his newest, The Passion Paradox. Together, they've spent decades helping couples create healthier, more connected relationships.
Bruce and Judy, welcome to Late Boomers. We're delighted to have you both with us.
Well, we're happy to be here, and I just have to correct you. I'm not a therapist.
Okay.
Bruce is a therapist. He likes to say I'm the real person on the podcast, but I'm a retired educator and author and lots of other stuff. But therapy is not among my talents. So,
well, they go well together.
Okay.
They do.
Yeah.
They do actually go very well together. Yeah. So Judy's not licensed, so we don't work together. But
I see. I thought that's how you.
We
did
make
the
beautiful
podcast.
music together. There's that.
Yeah, we do that. We do.
We do
Oh,
that.
And
good.
well, you should, being a couples therapist.
Indeed.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
Bruce.
literally, we do because we write songs together. So,
Oh, good. That's good. That's what I thought you meant. That sounds good.
Yeah, that too.
That's a whole other podcast.
It
Yes,
is.
indeed.
yes.
Bruce, one of the hardest things a couple can experience is betrayal. So is forgiveness really possible? And where does the healing process begin?
Yeah. Of course, it's possible in the sense that I've worked with so many couples over the years, and I've been in private practice for over 30 years. And I've worked with so many couples that have healed from betrayal. So clearly it is possible. Does that mean every couple ends up staying together? No. Does that mean every couple ends up healing and however you want to define healing? No, not really. But it certainly is possible. It takes enormous courage. One of the reasons I love doing the work that I do is it's so inspiring and also a great privilege to be invited into people's lives to help them that way. It's so inspiring to see the courage that people show when they're working through really hard stuff, and betrayal's among the hardest.
Yeah.
Well, are you talking about basically just sexual betrayal, or are there other types of betrayal?
No, actually, I mean, a book I wrote on it, and particularly the book I wrote on it, Betrayal and Forgiveness, I include sexual betrayal, of course, is kind of the most of what I see in the office, but also a betrayal between siblings, betrayal between business partners, friends. I have examples of all of those things in the book that I
And
wrote
even
about
with
it.
couples, there's financial, there's gambling, alcoholism, drug use. That so it's not just sexual betrayals that couples go through. There's all kinds of ways that you can betray your partner.
Yeah.
True. So
yeah.
true.
And Judy, I know you're not the therapist, but as you obviously are, since you're making music together, you must be privy to this information. So what do you see emotionally that people often don't expect? And do you know what helps them begin moving forward at all that Bruce has discussed with you?
Well, I think honest conversation, we talked a little earlier amongst ourselves about our 7-word formula. It's Bruce's 7-word formula: be kind, don't panic, and have faith. That's where we get the name of our 7-word podcast from. So I think that the not to panic part, because so often when something happens in a relationship, the first thing you do is you panic. You go into that freeze, and nothing can get. You can't think. You can't think straight. So I think the important part is not to be able to panic, as Bruce likes to say, to tolerate the anxiety.
Yes. we have sort of an in-joke that I
Uh-huh.
say that so often that we speculate that if people listening to our podcast had a drinking game where every time I said that they took a shot, they would be completely schnockered by the end of the podcast. So I do say tolerate the anxiety quite a bit,
Oh,
yes.
and I know Bruce, you've written that relationship problems are almost never really about communication. And
Mm.
that's kind of surprising because we hear the opposite all the time. So what do you mean by that?
Yeah, that was a fun. The book that I wrote it's the snarkiest title. It's the only of my titles that are snarky. That is snarky.
Good
The
word.
title of that book is "It's Not About Communication: Why Everything You Know About Couples Therapy Is Wrong," which I do point out late in the book. By the way, that last bit about everything you know about couples therapy being wrong applies to me too. Everything I know about couples therapy is wrong too. It's the knowing. So let me get back to your question about the communication part. It is the rule rather than the exception. In the first session, when I'm just meeting a couple and they're telling me what's going on, and they will almost always say, we need to communicate better. We need tools for communication. We need to figure out, because we try and talk about some of the stuff if it's at all controversial, we have differences or scary or whatever it is,
Mhm.
and we get into an argument or we just shut down and get into a deep freeze. Can you give us tools to communicate with? And what I love to point out in my rather snarky way is that they are almost always, they're the occasional exception, but almost always they're very good at communicating. That is not the problem. The problem isn't that they're not good at communicating. The problem is what they are communicating so effectively. If what they're communicating is contempt or anger or mistrust, that's going to come through no matter how carefully you craft your I statements or practice your active listening or engage in your nonviolent communication, all of which are good ideas, by the way. Nothing, they're
Mhm.
not bad. It's just that if you actually need them because you're freaking out, you won't be able to implement them. You'll just get into arguments about how you're doing it wrong. And if you don't need them, they're ridiculous.
Yeah.
They're absurd.
Mhm. Yeah,
Remember
because there are
on
human beings involved, and
there are
human
Yeah.
human
beings
beings. I mean,
human
you
beings are
remember on
screwing up what they know.
Yeah, we're
have you
not
seen the Four
bots.
Seasons? Do you know the Tina
Yeah.
Fey, Will Forte thing? They in
Yeah.
season one, we were watching it and just laughing. And season one, they had this great scene where Tina Fey and Will Forte, the married couple, one of the characters, were obviously doing couples therapy. They had been doing couples therapy, and I think Tina Fey had something she needed to say to Will Forte. He said, "I need a moment," and they clicked into their therapy speak. And you could tell they sent it up beautifully because you could tell they were accomplishing absolutely nothing. All they were doing was engaging in the practice, but of course that
Mm.
basically diverted them from actually being intimate, from actually saying how they felt. And so that's
Does.
why I say teaching people communications tools is almost always a waste of time.
Well, okay. And so, Judy,
Just made
um,
myself real popular with a lot of therapists out there.
Yeah, you did.
you've walked alongside all of this for a time. How long have you two been together?
We've been together 22 years, 23
So
years,
I'm sure
married
you've
22 years.
Yeah,
So
we're
I'm sure you
newlyweds.
two have had your
Another
ups and downs a bit. So what do you think, in knowing about what Bruce does and your education background, what do you think are the biggest mistakes people make when they're trying to restore trust or trying to communicate, if that's the right word? Trying to get things right? Is that a better word?
See, I say this thing about communication. Nobody wants to use the word anymore. No, it's okay. It's all right. It's
Yeah.
fine. I even tell couples, no, it's okay if you think you need communication things. Maybe you do. I could be wrong. That has happened. Anyway.
Well, I hate to say this, but we've had ups. I don't think we've had any
You haven't had a
downs.
lot of downs,
Yeah.
but there's a reason for that, I think.
Yeah, well, first, I think Bruce and I have both benefited from having crappy first marriages. So we came into the second marriage knowing what we wanted and knowing what we didn't want. So, I think it was like 45 when we met.
When we
You were
met,
about
yeah.
50.
I was 51, I think. Yeah.
So
Yeah, we were mature.
we were mature, and I I was single for 7 years, and I had gone through the dates, and it's like, so when I got a message from Bruce from one of the dating apps that I was on JDate, and he was like, "Well, I'm new to this. I don't know, should we talk? Should we call each other? Should we whatever?" And I said, like, let's just meet for coffee, because one, I didn't want to sit through another meal where I had to sit there saying, "Oh, please don't order dessert." I didn't want, it was
Yeah.
like, I don't want to go for drinks. I just want to, let's have coffee, see if we have anything in common. And if we don't, like, fish and cut bait. So after I met Bruce for that first cup of coffee, it was 2.5 hours later. It's like, oh, wow, this is
Yeah.
the guy. This
Let's
is
go
the
get
guy
some
for me.
food.
I can have a really deep relationship with him. He's
Isn't
like,
that neat?
we had similar backgrounds. We had similar upbringings. We had similar goals. We just had so much in common. I said to my friends, I was playing mahjong that night. I said to my girlfriends, I said, he's a male me. I mean, we are just like clicking.
That's perfect.
It was, and it's been like that ever since. I
Mhm.
hate to say
Good.
it, and it's not like we haven't faced adversity. We've had problems with our children, with grandchildren, family stuff, but it always comes down to he and I being able to communicate.
Oh no, you said the C word.
I
But-
know. Well,
But we can talk to each other very openly and very honestly, and not have to worry like the other one is gonna like insult me or jump down my throat and criticize me. I mean, a little trauma there from the first marriage. So I don't have
Yeah.
to worry about those things because he's just not that person, which is why I married him.
Well, and
Well-
if I can add to that, I mean, that's the other piece that's underneath all of that is the maturity part. Like what Judy was saying, it's like, yeah, we both had experiences and benefited greatly from knowing, yeah, we don't want to go through that again, but also we weren't kids. And you are way more mature. You still are more mature than I am, but you certainly
They
were
say that
then.
about women anyway.
Yeah, I think
Well,
that
Bruce, I wanted to
speaking to all
ask
the
you.
women, I think that's true. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you a question. You've described stability and intimacy as the two golden gifts that every relationship needs to thrive. So can you explain a little bit what those are, and why do you say, and you mentioned this earlier, tolerating anxiety is the chief skill of intimacy?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's kind of my central thesis, I guess, of a lot of the stuff that I do. That there's lots of ways of understanding, what do we need to be in a good couple, to be in a couple that feels like it works, that you want to be in. And a lot of ways of saying it, but I talk about these two different sets of needs, stability and intimacy, as you mentioned. And that book you mentioned that I wrote, the Passion Paradox, is about a paradox that exists there, because they're both needs. And I'm using the word needs carefully. They're not just desires. If they're not fulfilled enough, something feels sick. It doesn't work. And yet the requirements of the two are it's somewhat in conflict. Stability is all about, and the word stability I'm using in its usual sense. So you're probably thinking something similar to what I'm thinking. When things are stable, they're not shaky. You're not worried about them. If you wake up in the morning and you're not worried about your relationship, it's stable, or at least you think it's stable. So stability is really important. The more a couple, gets together, builds a life together, especially, have kids, things like that, it puts a huge premium on stability. It's really important. All the skills of stability are about being predictable. I think I talk about the boring trifecta of attributes: to be reliable, responsible, and accountable. I'm not knocking them. They're all really super important. They're also boring. They're predictable. That's what it's about. Stability is about that. Intimacy is equally a need, but intimacy isn't about predictability. It's about feeling alive in the moment. And what I mean by intimacy, not just sex, I mean more generally, is where you're present and honest with yourself and each other. That feeling of being alive. That can be beautiful. It can be ecstatic. It can also be terrifying, because sometimes being honest with your partner involves telling your partner something that they're not going to like. You're pretty just a complaint, something as simple as that, or maybe more serious, something that is saying, wow, I'm really worried about something, or I'm really worried about our relationship, or I want to try something new in bed and I'm worried you're going to think I'm weird, or, fill in the blanks. So that's why tolerating anxiety is necessary for intimacy. And the problem that happens with so many of the couples that I see is that they're too afraid to do that, especially if they've tried and it's gone off the rails. And so they shut down part of themselves. And over time, that doesn't work. Over time, that's where you get things like affairs, not the only reason for affairs, but it's a biggie. That's where you get some people getting depressed in the relationship. That's where you get somebody saying all of a sudden to the other, I'm out of here, I can't stand it anymore. That's where you get couples that are arguing about everything and nothing. So all of that. So, a lot of the work I do with couples in therapy is all about helping them learn how to not panic, which is the faith part is so you don't panic. It's not religious faith, but it's that mindset that says somehow this is all possible.
Well, can you give us one hint as to what you tell people when stability and intimacy are in conflict?
Well, that's almost always in the first session. I give them that little, more or less what I just said, the little mini lecture I just gave you, that the bit about there are these two needs. And I talk about that. And very often you can see the light bulbs. People will say, wow, I hadn't thought of it that way. Yeah, we're really good at stability, but we can't talk to each other. Or we're afraid to talk to each other, or we're afraid to be sexual, or, all of those things. So that tends to be how it comes up. And then when people can then focus on, well, how have we been avoiding intimacy? How have we been shutting down? That is scary stuff, but that's when you can start to talk about that without freaking out, then they can actually get someplace.
Yeah. So Judy, what do you think about how people become more comfortable with vulnerability and in the uncertainty that real intimacy requires?
Probably the ability to listen to your partner and try to be as non-judgmental as possible, and to really hear what they're saying, and to honestly reflect. If they're telling you something that they don't like, or that they are finding, like Bruce was saying, maybe they want to try something new in bed, or maybe they want to do something different, or maybe they don't like what you've been saying. It is to listen honestly and evaluate yourself, and not immediately get defensive. I think too often a lot of couples get defensive probably because there's so much back and forth, and it's like, somebody's got to win. And I think we're very equal partners. So we look at our marriage more like it's a team effort. No, I know without a doubt that Bruce always puts me and my needs above everything else. So I know that he's looking out for me and has my best interests at heart. So if he's telling me something, I'm going to listen to him. And I think the same goes for you.
That has a lot to do with respect too.
Yeah.
It is hugely about respect.
He's one of the most respectful people I know.
Well, and so
not just of me, but I see how he interacts with people just around him, and in his everyday life, and in our social circle. He's just that type of person. So,
well, again,
that's amazing.
So are you, and that it's coming back around to that notion of maturity again, that ability to actually, to hear and not freak out. It's you can tell I'm big on the not freaking out bit. That's why it's the middle of the don't panic part is in there, because it just doesn't work. You can't think clearly. You can't be available to.
Yeah, you get a shot of adrenaline.
Yeah.
And your brain goes out to lunch. Yep. But Bruce, you've also talked about what you call the death spiral for passion.
Yeah.
So what causes couples to lose that spark, and can they get it back?
Yes. Well, what causes and loses basically the same thing I was saying about stability and intimacy. That's the death spiral, because what people will do is if attempts at intimacy don't work. And again, I'm not just talking about sexually, but attempts at intimacy. If you're trying to tell your partner something important to you and they won't hear you, or you can't say it, or you're afraid to say it, then people tend to shut that down. That is, in fact, the death spiral for intimacy right there. Because the more you shut down, the less alive you feel.
Yeah.
And ultimately, you're left in, a lot of the folks who consult me, It's been going on for years where
Yeah.
they
Mhm.
just don't know how to connect with each other anymore.
And then they shut down
Oh.
to everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Judy, from your perspective, what do you think about that? And also, what do you think are some of the practical ways couples can rekindle emotional and physical closeness after years together that maybe they don't have?
But we're smiling because you just teed up a perfect question. So go for it.
Okay.
Can't wait to hear it.
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Oh, I'm referring to your book.
Oh, my book.
Yeah.
Oh.
All right. Let's hear that.
Yeah.
Well, because you're asking how might a couple, reignite that spark.
Okay. Well,
Take it.
well, we talked about, being able to talk to each other and hear each other and listen and take what the other was saying really to heart. But also being married to Bruce and doing our podcast. And even though I'm not a therapist, I've spoken with tons of therapists and regular therapists, sexual therapists, tantric therapists, all different types of people. So I was very inspired to start writing erotica.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I-
I saw something about that.
Can show you.
Excellent.
So I wrote this book called The Blue Tent, Erotic Tales from the Bible.
Oh, and by
So-
the way, Judy showed
Instead
us
of the red
cover.
tent. Yeah.
Exactly. That's
Like
Yeah,
yes,
that was
take-
the idea. Yes.
Well,
Take
yes.
up
With
on the red
apologies
tent.
to Anita Diamond. Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or
Oh,
maybe
tell us a
thanks to
little
Anita.
about
Tell
that.
us a little
Yes.
bit what that is.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was a teacher for many years, and then I ended my career working as an educator at a synagogue, so Jewish education for over 20 years. So I've always written. I was primarily a playwright, but then when I retired, I didn't want to do playwriting anymore. I wanted to do some other type of writing. I said, well, what do I really know? I said, well, I know a lot about the Bible and know a lot about sex. Well, between speaking to therapists and being married to this wonderful man. So I decided that I was going to write biblical erotica. So there didn't seem to be a lot in that area. So what I did was I took the usual stories from the Bible, and there's a lot of sex in that Bible that nobody really ever pays much attention to, or certainly we're not reading the stories to our
We
kids.
we didn't learn about that in Sunday school.
Exactly. But when you study it as an adult, which Bruce and I do, we go to a Torah study group every week at our synagogue. And, we've both done tons of reading over the years. And as I said, I was an educator, and, we did some teaching in the high school kids about sex and the Jewish take on it. But when you get down to it, a lot of the stories in the Bible itself have tons of sex, tons. So all I did was fill in some of the graphic details of what they don't have in the Bible. So, for
Mhm.
example,
It just says begat.
right. Yeah. Well, they had to be
they
doing
don't say
something to
how.
be begetting.
Yeah, I know.
But of course, if I can throw in, I mean, in Jewish tradition, actually, this is true in many different traditions, but certainly we're familiar with Jewish tradition. There is, in addition to the written text, there is also what's called Midrash, which is, expansive writings, sort of filling in the blanks. And the rabbis who wrote Midrash and the various other people who wrote that didn't shy away from sexual stuff at all. There's lots of stories in the Talmud. There's lots of stories in the Midrash more generally that you didn't have to make up any of these particular encounters.
No.
You just expanded on them.
Yeah, I just filled
Yeah.
in, like the details of what they're doing. But I mean, should I?
I don't know how
should go-
graphic you want it to be.
So, like, there's a midrash on when he was in the Garden of Eden before Eve came along.
Yeah.
In order for Adam to be able to name all the animals, which it does say in the text that he named all the animals. Well, what it doesn't say in the text and what Midrash says is that in order to name the animals, he had to intimately know them. So basically,
Oh my goodness.
had to
Yeah.
have sex with all the animals.
Can't figure out how we did it with mosquitoes. We haven't figured that one out yet. But
Thank goodness for Eve.
yes. Well, and actually before
And
Eve,
even before Eve, there was another character, Lilith, and she is viewed as, now she's viewed in Jewish literature kind of as a she demon, because she insisted on sexual equality with Adam. So she was actually, according to
Ooh.
Midrash, the first woman before Eve came along. And Eve was more submissive. So so these are stories. So I
heard
just
about
take the Lilith and Adam story, and I go through what their sexual escapades are. Then she flies out, and then Eve comes in, and then what the sexual dynamic between Adam and Eve and what their sex life is and what they do. Same thing, with other characters, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebecca. There's the story of
especially
Joseph.
some of those that are still giving birth when they're in their 80s and 90s.
Right.
Well, exactly. Yeah, she was 90
Yeah.
when she gave birth, which is pretty
so
good.
she
Yeah.
had to be having sex, and
Well, we're going to have to get both of your books.
Oh, indeed. Yes.
Yeah.
So that's what
Get hers first.
so that
keep you married.
That keeps things spicy. And as Bruce likes to say, if you get the audio, your hands free. So
Oh dear.
And Judy did Judy. We both, all of our books, we have both audio versions, and we each did our own. So Judy did a beautiful narration of hers, and
good.
she has a pseudonym, Laria Zilber. So people who are looking for her book, it's The Blue Tent: Erotic Tales from the Bible by Laria Zilber. If you search for just The Blue Tent on Amazon, you'll get blue tents. But so if you search for The Blue Tent: Erotic Tales from the Bible, then you'll get her
to go
book.
camping.
Yes,
You'll
Yeah,
have to
you're going to have to give
So-
them
That's
to us
fine,
at
but
the
it's not
end too
nearly
of,
as much
of our
fun.
podcast.
so
our
writing erotic
viewers
is a
and
fun one.
listeners can understand that.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so you've covered a little bit of this. Maybe we can elaborate, but you have a 7-word formula.
Mhm.
Be kind, don't panic, and have faith.
Yep.
And how did you create that? Why is it resonating with so many people?
I have my, my creation story of it. Cause I remember this, it was, I've been in private practice now for 31 plus years. And early on, probably the second or third year of my private practice, I was in a consultation group meeting, therapists get together and talk about stuff. And one of the people there, who happened to be a friend of mine, we were leaving the meeting. It was over. We were getting up and moving. And he turned to me, we must've been talking about couples therapy. I really don't even remember. But he turned to me and he said, "How do you do couples therapy anyway?" Like as if I could answer that, walking out the door. But I had actually given it a little bit of thought, and I had crafted a 5-word formula just to throw around other numbers. Be kind. Basically what I said was, I think if you boil down what we're doing, just really oversimplify what we're doing, we're basically trying to convey to people, be kind and don't panic. And the idea there is, if you're panicking, you can't be kind. And kind, I don't just mean be nice. I mean, be kin, that feeling of kinship. So be kind, that was 5 words, if you count and. Be kind and don't panic. But then I realized, I started sharing that with people, and they would say, "Well, that's interesting. That's really good. Tell me, I get that idea. How do you not panic?" And they had me there, because I had to realize, well, I don't have a simple answer to it other than to notice something, which is that the couples who were able to not panic, even dealing with things like betrayal and, awful sorts of things happening in their relationship, they were the ones who showed what I came to call faith. And I don't mean religious faith, but they came to show that sense of faith. And what I mean by faith is a mindset. It's this mindset that just says, this whole reality thing is right to be what it is, even though it's hard to understand sometimes and painful sometimes, but there's some rightness about it. Religious people would say, "Oh, you mean God is good," basically, which is exactly what it would mean from a religious standpoint. But from a non-religious standpoint, it's not, you don't even have to invoke the idea of God. It's just the idea that this whole reality business is basically right. So our life is basically meaningful, even when it's hard. Those are the folks who could cope with trying to understand betrayal, trying to understand, things going wrong, trying to understand somebody who's changing their mind about wanting to be in the relationship.
Right. Not wanting to bury whatever it was, the betrayal, the infidelity, and say, well, let's just get past this and go on with our lives again and pick up from where before this happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are the folks who say that are not showing that faith. And they don't get anywhere until they realize, no, not only can't you go back, you shouldn't go back. Where you want to end up is better off than you were.
Right.
Because where you were is what you got to.
Then there really is nothing, I guess. And Judy, what do you think about that? Can you elaborate more and talk about how powerful that could be with faith, and also paying attention where it's really important.
Well, I think, what Bruce started saying, about not wanting to go back, because that's where it got you in the first place. So what you want to do as a couple who's been through this, if you want to stay together, and that's not always a given that people want to stay together, but if you do want to stay together, or even if you want to still need to be in each other's lives because you have children together, is to get to a place where you can understand that, somebody might have, let's say the guy, if he cheated on you, what was your role in this relationship? What was it about you that it came to that? Where did that, getting back to the whole thing with intimacy, where did the intimacy break down? Why is he seeking something outside of the marriage? So you have to examine, because a relationship is not just two people. It's each of you individually, and it's your relationship as a couple too. And then all
with
the
your
other
family, I
external
would think,
forces.
as well, too.
Yeah,
It
and all the
affects
external
everybody.
forces that come with it, children, parents,
Yeah.
community. So all these factors that happen that get you to a certain place. So you've got to see what your role is in this thing of coupledom.
And I want to add to that. It's always a necessary part of understanding the context. It's a thin line, and especially early on, thin line between recognizing, yeah, you're both part of the context, and blaming the victim, because you don't want to do, the fact that the guy cheated on her doesn't mean that it was her fault that he cheated. His cheating was his own moral failing. Pretty much everybody I work with acknowledges that. I rarely I'm trying to think if I've ever met a couple where someone cheated and said, but it shouldn't be a problem. What's the matter with you? Nobody's in my office saying that. The ones who cheated are feeling very guilty about it. But so you don't want to blame, it's not her fault, even if she was, cold or something.
Right.
That didn't mean he should have cheated. He could have talked to her about it. But nevertheless, they're both part of the context. And it takes faith to go into that kind of conversation.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Bruce, you've compared couples therapy to improv theater. So that's a fascinating analogy. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, when I was writing that book, It's Not About Communication, I was speculating, thinking about that a lot. Like, what is it like? The first session I do with folks, I mentioned that little, mini lecture I give about stability and intimacy, and it sort of sets a tone and, usually sort of gives people some hope. It's like, oh, there's a way of understanding this. After that, it's not fixed anymore. It's not like I have these set questions that I'll ask people or set topics that we have to cover. We're following the meaning. And the reason I think it's like improv, and maybe I've tried it once or twice, but I'm not skilled at improv. You've done probably more than I have. Yeah. But, and several of our kids were, like theater people,
and Mary and I are both actors.
We
understand. Yeah, we understand.
Well, they do know better than I do. The thing about improv, and I'm sure you'll know this before I will, or knew it before I did, the yes and thing.
Yes and.
The thing about yes and. What I'm realizing is that in the beginning of work with a couple, they are not doing yes and. They're doing no, damn it.
Right.
No doubt. Oh.
But I'm still doing yes and. In other words, I'm trying to follow the thread where it goes, even if it seems ridiculous. Like improv, of course, is hilarious because it can get ridiculous. Well, I'm following the thread of meaning where it goes without freaking out. So when he says he cheated, or she says she cheated, or they say they cheated, I'm not freaked out about it. I'm curious. And that's sort of the sense of improv. So after that first session, the first session's like the prompt, it's like you have to have a good prompt for improv to get going. After that, who knows where it goes? Actually, when I was writing about that, I was thinking, what if the prompt were that you're lost, you find yourself lost, your car is broken down, and then this weird guy comes along and he sits down with you and he starts asking you all these strange personal questions. Well, that's basically therapy, So there's your prompt. So take it from there.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Love it. Love it.
Judy, what do you think about using improv in your marriage with Bruce?
I think our whole marriage is just
I was
improv.
thinking that same thing.
Yes, and
So no script or anything to it,
No,
just yes and.
no, we're up for anything.
Many things. I
Many
don't know.
things. Well, at least
Yeah.
we're up to hearing what the other one has to say. Doesn't mean we're always up for it. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Bruce,
So-
you have a chapter in your work titled Sex, Good Sex, and Sacred Sex.
Mhm.
So those are very intriguing distinctions. Can you explain the differences?
Yes, I can, and I have to say yes. I'm using them in a in a very quirky sort of way. The
Uh-huh.
first one, yeah, sex, good sex, and sacred sex. The first one, I in the chapter I call it plain old sex. What is plain old sex? Well, whatever you think it is. You know, if you think it's sex, it's sex. Well, I'm not going to get into a Clintonian discussion. You know, if I did not have sex with that woman or whatever. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
not going in,
Yeah.
not going there. It's what plain old sex requires. And this, of course, this part isn't funny. What plain old sex requires is that you not freak out. And people who've been sexually traumatized have trouble even with plain old sex. Just the idea sometimes of being sexual when somebody's been through, rape or other kinds of sexual trauma is very difficult. So even to do plain old sex, you need to process that stuff, recover from it, so that at least you can feel physically interested and able to do, again, whatever you call sex. So, the other thing that plain old sex requires basically is just a little bit of knowledge, some basic anatomy and basic physiology, what's where and what does what. Those are important things for plain old sex. Now, what takes plain old sex and turns it, at least in my definition, into good sex is when you introduce intimacy in the terms that we were talking about. I don't mean it has to be tender and, it could be very vigorous. But the point is that sense of feeling, of tolerating the anxiety of being alive and honest. So couples that can get to good sex have to be able to talk about things that maybe they're afraid to talk about initially, like fantasies, for example. Sometimes people are afraid to say fantasies because they're really worried, oh no, my partner's going to think I'm really weird for whatever it is the fantasy might be. So couples, and even simpler things like just saying, I like this, I don't like that, and not freaking out. Taking that as a gift. That's how you get to good sex. Sacred sex really is more about the sacred than it is about the sex. So what do I mean by sacred sex? Well, what do I mean by sacred? Sacred is when something, it's not just the two of you anymore. It's involved in higher forces and a higher purpose. And so there's it moves to sacred sex when you get out of yourself and you're connecting to, the Tantra people will talk about that, connecting to larger forces, or, even in terms of, traditional Western religions, connecting to God, but still feeling horny, without that having to, squash the lust, somehow connecting that to a greater purpose. That's what I mean by sacred. And of course,
I love that. I haven't heard that.
Yeah, and sex is amenable to that in particular. That's where Tantra comes from, that concept, because the forces of sex are awe-inspiring, and that's what sacredness is about. If you remember, anybody who's ever had anybody who's ever had a first orgasm, and they're not always nice, they're not always good. And the circumstances aren't always good, but the power is often awesome. It's like, I didn't know my body could do that. Or that it just seems like it took over. So sex is really amenable to that kind of thing. So when people are at the good sex stage where they can actually feel able to again, to tolerate some anxiety, then they can enter into the possibility of sacred sex.
So I have a question for both of you, but I want to ask Judy first. So what do you think couples often misunderstand about maintaining a fulfilling, intimate sexual relationship as they grow older together with older people? Talk about older people and fulfilling relationships.
Well, I can only talk about us, so I can't talk about other older people. Well, and my girlfriends, from what I hear from them.
No names.
No names. So, like Bruce said, it's a willingness to be able to talk to the other person, to tell them your desires, your likes, your dislikes. Obviously, there's going to be physical changes, physiological changes. Um, when people say sex, I think there's this conception that it means, penile penetrative sex. Sex doesn't have to be just that. It could be other things. It could be if couples, let's say they can no longer have sex, there are other things that you can do with each other to fulfill each other sexually, whether it's using hands or mouths or toys or other body parts, as one of our sex therapist friend likes to say. You got hands, you got feet, you got toes, you got a nose, you got a mouth. Make use of them. So, when you get older and you don't think of those things when you're 20 and 30, and you can be really acrobatic, but if you can't turn over and you can't have something inside you, whatever it is, if you want to go ahead and do other stuff, I think talking about that with your partner to explore is one of the things that keeps your sex life alive. And if you can't do any of that, even a hug or a deep kiss, you can always kiss and hug. Touching, all of that is very sexual. And so it doesn't have to be just a sex act. It just can be acts of connection, staring into each other's eyes, having a nice glass of wine after dinner and just looking at each other. Just things like that, giving each other back rubs. So it doesn't have to be a penetrative sex. It could just be other things that are creating a sense of intimacy between the two of you that help you feel connected. Because, who knows what's going to happen to us in 20 years if we're going to be able to. So I still want to have that connection with him.
Yeah. The one thing I'd add to that, I love to paraphrase at least the late David Schnarch, who was a couples therapist who wrote a lot about sexual stuff. And he would go around giving lectures to folks about the general topic of sex and couples. And he would ask the question of his audience. He'd say, at what age do you think men and women respectively reach their sexual peak? And, the usual answers would be, usually it's like, well, women older than men, men in their 20s, women in their 30s, or whatever it would be. And Schnarch would say, nope, both men and women reach their sexual peak in their 60s and 70s. What? People would say. That can't be, we're not talking hormones, right? We all go through, women, obviously menopause, and men also, like we ain't what we used to be when we get older. And we're not talking acrobatics, as you said. We're not talking, sexual gymnastics. He's talking about maturity, the very things you're describing. And I remember when I fell in love with you in my early 50s, commenting that, wow, this is as intense as it was when I was 18, except now I can talk.
Right.
In other words, there was maturity. I could say things and not be afraid. And in ways I couldn't do when I was younger. So maturity. So it does not, the sexual intimacy, there's no particular age where it has to end. And the myths people will have, and here I'm not to mansplain to the three women in the conversation, but, the idea that, sex goes out the window with menopause is simply not the case statistically for many, many, many women. And again, you guys would know it much better than I would. And and for men as well. The stuff about, erectile dysfunction, they define these things as opposed to your dick doesn't get as hard as it used to all the time. Well, okay, that doesn't have to throw anything off if you don't freak about it. That would be a misconception, I would say, too, is that people think it has to go away because it doesn't.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, Bruce and Judy, this has been a very thoughtful conversation, and you've given us so many practical tools and with a deeper understanding of what makes lasting relationships work.
Yeah, that's really poignant. And if listeners would like to learn more about where they can find your podcast, Couples Therapy in 7 Words, and your books, Bruce, including The Passion Paradox, and yours, Judy, would you say what the name is and your pen name is again?
Sure. It's The Blue Tent, Erotic Tales from the Bible, and Laria Zilber, Zilber. And
Yeah.
you could find all the information on our podcast site, CT, like Couples Therapy, ctin7.com, or you can go to brucechalmer.com, his website. And there's also a LarryAzilber.com website for my book and all that good stuff.
Oh, thank you so much.
Well,
And thank
thank
you to
you.
our listeners for joining us today. We hope this conversation has given you new ideas and encouragement for your own relationships.
And if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with just one friend who needs to hear this conversation. It's one simple way to spread ideas that can make a real difference.
And be sure to subscribe to Late Boomers wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode.
So until next time, remember that it's never too late to grow, to connect, and to create the life and relationships that you want.
Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time on Late Boomers.